There are two people I want you to think about. The first one wakes up on a Monday morning and checks their bank account before they even get out of bed. Not out of curiosity, but out of pure instinct, touching a bruise to see if it still hurts. It does. They have a 9 a.m. Teams call with a manager who has never once started on time, and they will sit through it with their camera on and their teeth together because there's a mortgage payment on Friday and a car payment the week after that. They cannot afford to say what they actually think. Not right now, maybe not ever. The second person wakes up on the same Monday morning. They also check their phone. They're looking at the weather. They make coffee in the same kitchen they've made coffee in for 3 years, and it still feels like a choice they made, not a consolation prize. They decide to go for a walk first, deal with their inbox later, or maybe not today at all. They're not indifferent to money. They still think about it. But money is no longer the invisible fence that determines the entire shape of their life. This isn't a story about being rich. It's a story about what it actually feels like when money stops running the show. My name is Nick, and today we're going to talk about financial freedom, not the motivational poster version, but the real, honest, sometimes uncomfortable version. What the math looks like, what it actually feels like day to day, and how you get there without losing a decade of your life in the process. Let me show you what financial captivity actually looks like, because most people living inside it have stopped noticing how much it's costing them beyond dollars. Meet a household we'll call the Garcias, two working professionals. She's a project manager making $68,000. He's in logistics making $71,000. Combined household income, $139,000. That puts them well above the median, solidly upper middle class on paper. They should be comfortable. They should be building something. Let's watch what actually happens to their money. First, their gross income of $139,000 sounds great until federal taxes, state taxes, FICA, and a modest 401k contribution show up. After all of that, they're taking home around $8,200 a month. That's their actual money to live on. They bought a house 2 years ago, $420,000, which felt responsible compared to what their friends were spending. Mortgage payment, $2,450. Property taxes, $480 a month. Homeowner's insurance, $180, and then the water heater died last March, which nobody puts in their budget because nobody ever thinks the water heater is going to die until it does at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. They're now on a payment plan for that. Add $85 a month. Total housing, $3,195. We're already at 39% of take home, and we haven't left the house yet. 2 cars, because nothing where they live is walkable, $620 combined in car payments. Insurance for both vehicles, $310. Gas, because they both commute, $340. That's $1,270 in transportation. We're now at $4,465 gone. They have $3,735 left for literally everything else in their lives. Student loans. They both needed degrees to get the jobs that qualified them for the mortgage. Combined payment, $580. Health insurance premiums their employers don't fully cover, $390. Groceries for 2 people trying to eat reasonably like adults, $760. Utilities, electricity, gas, water, internet, 2 phones, $420. We're at $6,615 out the door. They have $1,585 left, and we haven't touched clothing. Car repairs, because both cars are over 4 years old, and one of them has a check engine light that's been on since October. The annual home maintenance rule says budget 1% of your home's value per year, which is $350 a month for a house that is going to keep needing things regardless of whether they budgeted for it. The gym membership, neither of them has canceled. The one streaming service that became 4, the birthday dinner they can't get out of, the school fundraiser, the copay, the tire. This household earns $139,000 a year and has approximately $1,585 a month left after fixed costs, before anything unexpected, before any savings, before any retirement beyond the minimum that gets them the employer match. They are not irresponsible. They are not buying jet skis or taking European vacations. They made reasonable decisions at every step and arrived at a life where one transmission repair is a credit card and one job loss is a genuine crisis. This is what financial captivity feels like day to day. It feels like knowing the exact balance of your savings account without checking, because it hasn't changed in 3 months. It feels like saying yes to overtime you don't want because the math doesn't work otherwise. It feels like lying awake, not worrying about survival. You're not about to lose everything, but worrying about the next thing and the thing after that, in a chain that never seems to end. It's not poverty, it's a treadmill that looks from the outside like success. And here's what makes it worse. Financial stress makes you worse at solving financial problems. Researchers found it reduces cognitive capacity by the equivalent of 14 IQ points. The same drop as going 24 hours without sleep. The person lying awake at 2 a.m. doing tire math is also, at that exact moment, the least equipped they will ever be to solve that problem. The stress makes you dumber about the thing causing the stress. It's a feature, not a bug, if you're the credit card company. And this isn't an accident. Credit card companies make more money when you carry a balance. Banks make more money when your mortgage is bigger. Car dealerships make more money when you finance for longer. Your financial precariousness is their revenue model. Understanding that isn't cynicism. It's just knowing whose interests are actually at stake when someone tells you that you're approved. I'm telling you all of this not to depress you, but because the inverse of every single thing I just described is what financial freedom actually feels like. It's not a bigger house or a fancier car. It's the removal of a weight you've been carrying so long you forgot it was there. So what does it feel like? Let me give you the honest version, because the internet version is mostly stock photos of people on beaches with laptops, which, as a description of financial freedom, is doing a lot of heavy lifting for very little information. The initial feeling, according to people who've been there, is euphoric. And then it fades. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation, which is a fancy way of saying your brain is ungrateful. You worked for years to get here, and it just recalibrates. Thanks, nothing for you. What doesn't fade is something much subtler. The absence of dread. That background hum of financial anxiety, the quiet, constant voice calculating in the corner of your mind, goes silent. And you don't notice how loud it was until it stops. The day-to-day changes are specific and kind of mundane in the best possible way. You stop fearing your employer. When you have 3 months of expenses saved, you can say no to something unreasonable at work. When you have 3 years of expenses invested, you can walk away entirely if you need to. You start making decisions based on what you actually want instead of what you can afford to risk. A tire blows out, you fix the tire. You're mildly annoyed instead of spiraling into a 3-day anxiety loop that starts with the tire and ends with you questioning every financial decision you've made since 2019. But here's the part that surprises most people, and I want to be direct about it because most financial content skips it entirely. 2 things consistently catch people off guard when they actually get there, and neither of them are math problems. The first is identity. There's a guy, we'll call him Marcus. He spent 22 years in corporate finance, hit his number at 51, and retired with $2.3 million in index funds and a 4% withdrawal rate that the math said was bulletproof. For the first 3 months, he did everything he'd imagined. Slept in, traveled, played golf twice a week. Month 4, he started checking the portfolio every day. Month 6, he took a part-time consulting contract just to stay sharp. By month 9, he was working 30 hours a week and not entirely sure why. Marcus didn't fail to reach financial independence. He reached it and discovered that the freedom he'd built was a room he didn't know how to live in. The work wasn't just paying the bills, it was providing structure, community, purpose. When the financial coercion to work disappears, you find out quickly whether you had a life outside of it. The second is decumulation anxiety, a clinical way of saying that many people who build wealth then find they can't bring themselves to spend it. 46% of American retirees describe spending as anxiety-inducing. One survey found that 64% of Americans fear running out of money more than they fear death. More than death. So you spend years conditioning yourself to save aggressively, and then the habit doesn't just switch off. You're watching a balance decline for the first time in your adult life, and it feels wrong. Even when the math says it's completely fine, knowing these things in advance doesn't make them not happen, but it does mean you can build a life alongside the money, like not just a portfolio. Okay, I want to pause here because I've shown you what financial captivity costs and what freedom actually feels like. But I haven't shown you the math that makes it reachable, and specifically the thing about that math that most people get completely backwards. Once you see it, the whole picture changes. Let's start with your freedom number, because it's more calculable than most people think. On the foundation is something called the 4% rule. A financial researcher named William Bengen backtested every 30-year retirement period going back to 1926 and found that a portfolio invested mostly in stocks could sustain a 4% annual withdrawal rate, adjusted for inflation, and survive about 95% of those historical periods. The math is clean. Multiply your annual expenses by 25, and that's your freedom number. Spending $40,000 a year, you need $1 million. Spending $60,000, $1.5 million. Spending $80,000, $2 million. Nobody's buying a yacht on any of this. A $1 million portfolio at 4% generates $40,000 a year. It's comfortable. It's not a rap video, but it means money is no longer making your decisions for you, which is the actual point. Now, the single most important variable in how quickly you reach that number is not your income. This is the thing most people get completely backwards. It's your savings rate, the percentage of your take home that you invest and leave alone. At 10% savings, which is where most people feel responsible, give themselves a little mental high five and move on, you are 51 years from financial independence. 51. If you start at 25, you're done at 76. You've outlived the mortgage, but not by much. Bump that to 20% and you shave off 14 years. Get to 30% and you're at 28 years out. Hit 50%, spend half, save half, and you're 17 years from never having to work again. And if you can get to 75%, which sounds insane until you actually run the numbers on a modest lifestyle, you're 7 years out. Yeah, 7. That's not a retirement plan. That's a different life. And here's the critical insight most people miss. Cutting your spending does two things simultaneously. It increases your savings rate, which speeds up the timeline, and it reduces your freedom number because a lower cost lifestyle requires a smaller portfolio to sustain. Someone earning $80,000 and spending $40,000 is in a dramatically better position than someone earning $200,000 and spending $190,000. The high earner who spends almost everything is on a 51-year timeline. The moderate earner, saving half, is 17 years out. Same years of working life, wildly different financial outcome. There's also something called coast fire, the point at which you've invested enough that even if you never contribute another dollar, compound growth alone will carry you to your full freedom number by traditional retirement age. Go for a 30-year-old, like with $300,000 invested at 7% real returns, will have approximately $1.3 million by age 60 without saving another cent. The retirement problem is mathematically solved. They can work part-time, change careers, do something they actually like. The pressure releases dramatically before they've hit full FI. So now let me tell you about compound growth, because this is where the math gets genuinely strange. Charlie Munger once said at a Berkshire Hathaway meeting that the first $100,000 is a bitch, his exact word, but you have to do it. Here's why. Invest $10,000 a year at 7% returns. Reaching your first $100,000 takes roughly 8 years, and 86% of it is money you personally contributed. Your investments barely helped, but at $1 million, your portfolio is earning $70,000 a year on its own, more than the median American salary, without you doing a single thing. The second $100,000 takes 5 years. The third takes 4. The math is relentlessly patient. It doesn't care how you feel about it. It just compounds. Ronald Reed was a Vermont janitor, like an actual janitor. You create gas station attendant, drove a used car, lived in the same modest house for decades. When he died in 2014 at 92, his estate was worth $8 million, built entirely through consistent index fund investing over decades, never touching the principal, reinvesting dividends, doing absolutely nothing clever. The people around him, including his own family, had no idea. He wasn't doing anything complicated. He just never stopped doing the simple thing. Real wealth is invisible from the outside. Well, the person in the 2019 Corolla looks like they can't afford better. He goes, the guy in the leased BMW looks like he's crushing it. 3 missed paychecks says otherwise, like, we've collectively agreed to confuse the costume for the person wearing it, and that confusion is costing the Corolla driver, who's actually doing fine, enormous social pressure to upgrade into a worse financial position. Here's something the financial independence community doesn't really advertise. A significant percentage of people who reach their freedom number don't stop. They keep working, not because they have to, or because the number they thought would feel like freedom doesn't quite feel like enough. This is called one more year syndrome. You hit $1 million and think, actually, $1.2 million would feel safer. You hit $1.2 million and think $1.5 million. Not to be responsible. The goalpost keeps moving and you keep running. At some point, you realize the goalpost has its own legs and it's been jogging away from you the entire time. The hardest financial skill, as Morgan Housel puts it, is getting the goalpost to stop moving. And it doesn't stop on its own because the mindset that built the portfolio doesn't automatically know when to hand the controls over to the person who gets to actually live. The way out is to stop treating financial independence as a finish line and start treating it as a gate that unlocks choices. Financial freedom is not about retiring from your life. It's about making the next chapter deliberate instead of accidental. Most people who reach FI continue working, but differently. They take on consulting instead of employment. They pursue projects that interest them. They say no to the things they always said yes to out of obligation. The work doesn't disappear. The coercion does. All right. Let's bring this back to earth, because none of what I've described matters if there's no road to it. Step 1 is building a $1,000 emergency buffer, then expanding it to 3 to 6 months of expenses. This isn't glamorous and it's not investing, like it's insulation. Right now, 59% of Americans cannot handle a $1,000 surprise without going into debt. The Garcias. If they had $15,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account, their entire relationship with financial anxiety would shift. The buffer is not just financial protection, it's a cognitive reset. You stop making decisions from scarcity the moment you have a cushion. Step 2 is eliminating high-interest debt. With credit card APRs averaging 22.3%, every dollar of credit card debt is costing you more than any investment is realistically going to return. There is no portfolio strategy that competes with a guaranteed 22% return from paying off a credit card. This is not exciting advice. It's just correct. Step 3 is investing in broad market index funds through tax-advantaged accounts. Not individual stocks, not whatever is being discussed with breathless excitement on social media this week. The S&P 500 has returned roughly 10% per year, nominally going back to 1926. Funds like VTI or VOO give you that return at a near zero fee. In 2026, you can put up to $24,500 in a 401k and $7,500 in an IRA. Automate it on payday. Do not look at it when the market drops. Just leave it alone and let it compound. Step 4 is increasing income while deliberately keeping lifestyle flats. Yeah, every raise, every bonus that gets invested instead of spent is doing double duty, adding to the portfolio and keeping the freedom number low. The people who fail here aren't failing because they don't earn enough. They're failing because every income increase was immediately followed by an equivalent lifestyle upgrade. New income in, new expenses out, same savings rate, same timeline, just with a nicer apartment and a more expensive version of the same problem. And step 5, the most underrated, is building a life you actually want to live at your current spending level, not at a spending level you're waiting to afford. The people who get there fastest generally figured out that the most important things in their lives, time with people they love, work that interests them, physical health, don't cost nearly as much as they thought. Let me bring you back to where we started. The Garcias, $139,000 combined income, $1,585 left at the end of the month, one transmission away from a credit card. They're not a cautionary tale about bad decisions. They're the predictable result of a system designed to keep people spending just a little more than they earn, borrowing to cover the gap and working to service the debts. It works precisely because most people never run the actual numbers, and most of the institutions involved have a very strong financial interest in making sure they don't. Like, the math is available to almost everyone: a savings rate, a freedom number, compounding that doesn't need your help. It just needs your patience. The first $100,000, which is miserable. The second, which is merely difficult. Everything after that, which mostly just requires leaving it alone. The question is whether you're going to run the numbers honestly with real figures from your actual life, rather than the version that makes you feel better in the short term. If this video made something click, if you're sitting there thinking, I want to actually figure out my number, I want to stop winging this, I want to build something that runs on a system instead of on willpower, then I want to point you somewhere. I've put together a community where we work through exactly this. Not motivation, not theory, the actual framework, resetting your finances, building a cash flow system that runs on autopilot, avoiding the traps that keep most people stuck, learning to invest simply, and working backward from your own freedom number. Everything in one place. People doing the same work. The link is in the bio. Check it out when you're ready. No pressure. But if you're serious about this, that's where we're doing the work.